You forged my signature!
That house is not yours anymore.
53 years, my whole life.
Wait, that signature is fake. Hands off the file! You're just the parking lot sweeper. Then why is your hand shaking? Forget what you saw. Too late. You just warned him! I need him to panic. Move the files. Find who's watching us.
The county wants you gone.
He's hunting me now. You followed the wrong people.
Roland, they found me.
Get down! Who are you?
We can't move on Prescott.
Then you're protecting him. Throw them out.
There are children inside.
Prescott will bury you.
Who are you?
The one man who can stop him.
Not 47 homes. 61 and a politician.
Prescott knows who you are. Then we only have until dawn.
The photographs hit the asphalt first. Then the cardboard box tipped sideways and everything inside scattered a ceramic angel missing one wing. A Bible with a cracked spine. A faded Polaroid of a young man in an army uniform standing in front of a house that no longer belonged to the woman, screaming on the courthouse steps. Two deputies walked Mrs. Alma Jean Dixon across the parking lot of the Duval County Courthouse. Between them, Deputy Lena Coulter held a manila folder and spoke in a voice flat enough to sand wood. Ma'am, according to county records, this property was transferred via quitclaim deed 14 months ago. The court validated the transfer through default judgment. You no longer have legal ownership of the residence. Mrs. Dixon was 78 years old. She had taught third grade at Eastside Elementary for 31 years. Her husband Samuel had died in 2019, leaving her the house on Moncrief Road that they had owned outright since 1971. She clutched a piece of paper to her chest, the original deed, yellowed. Samuel's signature next to hers in careful cursive. I never signed anything. I never sold my house. Nobody served me any papers. I never got called to any court. The service affidavit shows notification was delivered to the address and signed for by the occupant. Ma'am, when no response was filed, the court entered default judgment. I'm sorry. Coulter did not look sorry. She looked like a woman completing a task on a checklist. As they crossed toward the curb, Mrs. Dixon stumbled. The box tipped. Photographs spilled across the blacktop 20 feet away. The parking lot attendant set down his orange traffic cone and walked over. He knelt on the hot asphalt, gathering photographs with hands that were steady and unhurried. He was a quiet man, mid-50s, salt and pepper beard trimmed close, wearing a navy polo with the Allied security logo stitched above the heart. The kind of man nobody looked at twice. He placed the photographs back in the box one by one, but as he gathered the last stack, his eyes caught the court order still in Coulter's folder, specifically the quitclaim deed attached to the filing. A quitclaim deed required a notarized signature, even at a glance. The signature on the photocopied deed was wrong. The loops were too uniform, the pressure too consistent, and the notary stamp beside it bore a commission number that he instinctively catalogued because cataloging numbers was something he had never been able to stop doing. No matter how many years separated him from the work, he handed Mrs. Dixon the box. He called her grandson Terence to come pull the truck around. He helped her into the passenger seat and closed the door gently. He did not say what he was thinking. He did not say anything at all. But Wayne Prescott, the Duval County clerk, had just made a mistake, and the parking lot attendant was exactly the wrong person to notice it. Roland Jefferies had been invisible for 7 years, and he preferred it that way. He arrived at the courthouse lot at 6:30 every weekday morning, unlocked the barrier arm, swept the entrance lane, and set out the orange cones. By 7:15, the first cars rolled in, and Roland was stationed at his booth near the entrance. He knew every vehicle. Judge Whitfield's silver Mercedes, always spot 3. Public Defender Salinas's dented Honda, perpetually late, and Wayne Prescott's black Lincoln Town car, every morning at precisely 7:40, pulling into the reserved spot nearest the side entrance. Grey suit, red tie, a brief nod toward Roland that never once included eye contact. Roland noticed that he noticed everything. It was the kind of habit that 25 years of fieldwork burned into a man's nervous system, a permanent alertness that no amount of retirement could extinguish. There was one car he had catalogued with particular care, a dark blue Cadillac Escalade with no dealership frame, appearing every last Friday of the month, parked in visitor spot 12 for 20 to 30 minutes, then gone. Roland had memorized the plate number the second time it appeared, because men who visited courthouses on precise schedules without appearing on any docket were men worth remembering. That night, after the eviction, Roland sat at his kitchen table in the rented duplex on the west side of town. A glass of water he did not drink, a phone he did not pick up. On the refrigerator door, was a photograph turned face down. He had flipped it that way 3 years ago and never turned it back. His 2 daughters, ages now 26 and 23, standing on a pier in Pensacola. They had not called since Christmas 2021. His ex-wife had not called at all. That was the price of 25 years spent becoming other men inside organizations that killed anyone who asked the wrong questions. Militia compounds in the Ozarks, arms trafficking networks along the Gulf Coast, sovereign citizen cells that stockpiled enough ordnance to start small wars. He had been very good at disappearing into dangerous rooms. So good that the disappearing eventually consumed the man who walked in, the bottom drawer of the refrigerator, a habit from his undercover days. Because nobody searched the crisper, held a waterproof case containing his retired credentials, a burner phone with 3 numbers programmed, and a ruggedized laptop he had never returned. He opened the drawer. He looked at the case. He closed the drawer. The next morning, Roland checked under his truck before starting the engine. Another habit he could not break. The men he had infiltrated militia commanders. Arms dealers had long memories. If his name ever surfaced in a public record, connected to a face, connected to an address, those memories would activate, and this time there would be no extraction team. He drove to work over the next 2 weeks. Roland listened. Leon Bridges, 81, sat on the bench outside the courthouse every Wednesday because he had nowhere else to go. His house on Pierce Street, paid off since 1968, had been transferred 2 years ago to an entity called Riverside Holdings, LLC. According to the county records, Leon had signed a quitclaim deed and been properly served notice of a title transfer hearing. Leon had signed nothing. Leon had received nothing. A default judgment was entered when he failed to appear at a hearing he never knew existed. Legal aid reviewed the recorded documents and told Leon the transfer appeared facially valid. Darlene Cook, 45, a single mother of 3, had been refinancing her Moncrief Road house when she discovered the title had already been transferred to something called Eastport Development Group. The quitclaim deed bore her signature, except it wasn't her signature. A notary named Franklin Voss had certified it as authentic. When Darlene filed a complaint with the clerk's office, the complaint was reviewed by the clerk's office. The clerk's office found no irregularity. Pastor James Mosley's church on Everson Street had owned a quarter-acre parking lot since 1982. Last spring, a quiet title action filed by an attorney none of the congregation had ever heard of claimed the lot through adverse possession. Service was allegedly delivered to the church. The pastor never received it. A default judgment transferred the lot. The church could no longer host its weekend food pantry 200 families every Saturday because there was nowhere for volunteers to park. 3 people, 3 properties, 3 fraudulent proceedings, all linked to the same notary, the same deputy, and the same clerk's office. Roland did not need a federal database to see the pattern. He needed the pattern to see the network. He asked Terence Odom to help. Terence was Mrs. Dixon's grandson, 34, an Iraq war veteran who drove long-haul trucks. He possessed the particular kind of controlled anger that comes from watching your grandmother lose her home and being unable to stop it. "I need you to drive me past some properties on your day off," Roland said. "Why can't you drive yourself?" "Because if anyone's watching, a parking lot attendant driving around photographing construction sites looks like a problem. A truck driver visiting his grandmother's old neighborhood looks like nothing." Terence studied Roland for a long moment. "Mr. Jefferies, you talk like a cop. I talk like someone who pays attention. Are you in or not?" Of the properties Roland knew about, 2 had already been demolished. Where Darlene Cook's house once stood, a 4-story condominium frame was rising from a fresh concrete pad. The construction sign read, "A Hale Development Group Project." Roland photographed the sign through Terence's truck window. He also asked Terence to contact legal aid on behalf of Mrs. Dixon. The response came in 4 days, insufficient evidence of fraud. They recommended a private attorney. The private attorney quoted $15,000. Mrs. Dixon's savings account held $612 that same week. Coulter served eviction notices on 3 more families in East Side. One of them was Pastor Mosley. Given 72 hours to vacate the parking lot, Roland watched from across the street as the pastor stood on the sidewalk, holding a property tax receipt from $1,983. Watching a chain-link fence go up around the land his congregation had maintained for 40 years, that evening, Roland sat in Terrence's truck outside the duplex. Legal aid won't take it. Roland said, "No private attorney will touch it without 15 grand. Nobody has. And the system that's supposed to catch fraud is the same system running it. So what do we do? Nothing. Unless I do something I promised myself I'd never do again." Which is what? Roland looked through the windshield at the empty street. 7 years of silence. 7 years of being no one. If he opened that drawer and powered on that laptop, he was stepping back across a line that had cost him his marriage, his daughters, and the permanent hum of paranoia that made him check under his truck every morning. And if this went where he thought it would go, if his name ended up in a federal court filing, in a newspaper, on a screen, the men on the other side of that line would find him. "I used to work for the federal government," Roland said. "I know how to read documents, and I know when someone is running a scheme. That's not a real answer. It's the only one I have right now. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Nothing more. Nothing less. Can you do that?" Terrence gripped the steering wheel. "My grandmother is sleeping in my spare bedroom because someone stole her house. I can do whatever you need." That night, Roland opened the bottom drawer. He took out the laptop, powered it on for the first time in 3 years, and connected to his neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi. The Duval County Clerk's office maintained a public property records database, every deed transfer, every lien, every quitclaim filing digitized and searchable. It took Roland 11 minutes to find the first shell company. It took 4 hours to find all of them. Riverside Holdings, Eastport Development Group, Moncrief Capital Partners, Duval Heritage Trust. 4 entities registered with the Florida Division of Corporations within a 14-month window, all listing the same registered agent, an attorney named Gary Arnett. Every LLC was managed by a holding company called Hale Ventures, Inc. Sole officer, Marcus Hale. Roland plotted the addresses of every transferred property on a map. The result was a corridor 12 blocks long, 3 blocks wide, running through the heart of Eastside Jacksonville. He cross-referenced against Public Planning Commission minutes and found it a proposed mixed-use development called Eastport Commons, requiring the assembly of 47 contiguous parcels. One detail stopped him cold. The registered agent, Gary Arnett, the same man who drove the dark blue Escalade to the courthouse every last Friday. Roland built a chart on the wall of his spare bedroom. Shell companies, property addresses, dates of transfer, names of notaries, case numbers of default judgments. At the center, 5 names connected by lines. Prescott controlled the records. Arnett built the legal structure: forged deeds, fake service affidavits, quiet title actions designed to produce default judgments. A notary named Franklin Voss certified every fraudulent signature. Coulter signed false affidavits, confirming legal notice had been delivered, and then enforced the evictions. Hale provided the money and received the land. 5 people operating a machine that converted families into vacant lot. Now Roland had to decide what to do with it. And more specifically, he had to decide whether his next move was strategy or anger. He chose wrong. The next morning, while Prescott was inside the building, Roland walked to the black Lincoln and placed a sheet of paper under the windshield wiper. 5 addresses. Printed. No note. No signature. The addresses of Mrs. Dixon, Leon Bridges, Dalina Cook, Pastor Mosley, and a 5th family identified the night before. It was a mistake. He knew it was a mistake, even as he did it. A trained operative would have maintained surveillance, built the case in silence, never tipped the target. But Roland had watched Mrs. Dixon's photographs scatter across that parking lot, and somewhere beneath 25 years of discipline, something had cracked. He wanted Prescott to feel watched. He wanted the man to sweat. Prescott found the paper at 5:30. Roland, sweeping the south lane with his back turned, watched in a car's side mirror as Prescott unfolded it, went rigid, and scanned the lot with the wild eyes of a man who had just found a snake in his bed. Then Prescott got in his car and sat for 4 minutes before starting the engine. The consequences were immediate. By noon the next day, Coulter's cruiser was in the lot. She stayed in Prescott's office 40 minutes. then emerged, carrying 2 banker's boxes loaded into the trunk of her personal Pathfinder. Not the county vehicle. Whatever was in those boxes was not supposed to exist on official channels. Roland noted the time, the boxes, and the license plate he already knew. 2 days later, Prescott's assistant clerk, Janet Woodard, resigned. Prescott had pulled her into his office, interrogated her about who had access to property records, and threatened to report her to law enforcement as a co-conspirator if she spoke to anyone. Janet crumbled. She was gone by Monday. 3 days after that, Prescott accelerated. He called Marcus Hale and Gary Arnett to a meeting at a steakhouse on San Marco Boulevard. Roland could not attend. But Terrence, against Roland's explicit instructions, followed Hale's Mercedes and parked across the street. He photographed all 3, entering and exiting. What Terrence did not notice was the restaurant's valet, who noticed him. The valet mentioned it to the hostess. The hostess mentioned it to Prescott's table. By the time Terrence drove home, Hale's people had his plate number. 2 mornings later, Roland arrived at his booth to find Allied Security's regional manager waiting for him, Jefferies. "We got a complaint from the county clerk's office. They say you've been photographing vehicles in the lot and harassing courthouse staff. I sweep the lot and wave at cars. That's the job. The clerk says you've been observed placing materials on vehicles and making unauthorized contact with county employees. They've requested your removal. I'm sorry. Roland, you're reassigned effective immediately." Roland collected his vest and his broom. He walked out of the lot he had worked for 4 years without looking back. But as he reached his truck, he found something that stopped his blood cold, a parking citation tucked under his wiper. Not a real citation, a photocopy of his Allied Security employment file, with a 25-year gap in his work history circled in red ink. Beneath it, handwritten in block letters, "Who are you?" Prescott was looking for him now, and Roland had given him a reason to look that night. Terrence called. His voice was tight. "2 guys showed up at my apartment complex, asking my neighbor questions about me. Said they were insurance adjusters. My neighbor said they didn't look like insurance adjusters. Did they get inside? No. But they took pictures of my truck, the same truck I used to follow Hale." Roland closed his eyes. His pressure moved the paper on the windshield, had not smoked out the network. It had armed it. Prescott was not just scared. He was hunting. And Roland had dragged Terrence into the crosshairs. "Stay at your grandmother's tonight. Don't go home." Roland. Who the hell are these people? They're people who steal houses for a living, and they're trying to figure out who's asking questions. Listen to me carefully. Do not approach anyone. Do not follow anyone. Do not take pictures of anything. From this point forward, you stay invisible. Like you. The question landed harder than Terrence intended. Roland said nothing for a long time. Then, yeah, like me. Roland was off the grid now. No badge. No booth. No daily view of who came and went. Prescott had removed his eyes. But Roland still had the financial trail, the property records, and the chart on his wall. What he needed was someone inside the machine willing to break it open. He needed Coulter. But Coulter was not ready. Not yet. Roland called a number he had not dialed in 4 years. It rang twice, played a disconnection message, and waited for a 6-digit code. 3 seconds of silence. "Jefferies. You still alive?" The voice belonged to Dale Cantor. "ATF Jacksonville. Barely. I need a name." Dale, who at the DOJ Office of Inspector General handles complaints about FBI field officers protecting targets. "What are you into?" "Roland. Something ugly. I'll tell you when it's done. You always say that. One of these days, you won't be around to tell me anything." A pause. "Be careful. Your name shows up in any federal filing. You know what happens. The Tennessee people, the Gulf Coast people, they're still out there. I know. Do you? Because last time, we had an extraction plan. This time, you're a parking lot attendant with a laptop and a grudge. I'm aware of the downgrade. Just give me the name." Roland called the FBI Jacksonville field office the next day. He asked for the Public Corruption Unit and reached Supervisory Special Agent Diana Kessler. He outlined the evidence shell companies, forged deeds, fraudulent notarizations, false service affidavits, pattern of displacement targeting black homeowners. Kessler listened for 9 minutes. Then she said, "Mr. Jefferies, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, but Wayne Prescott is currently relevant to a separate ongoing federal investigation. I can't discuss specifics. If we move on him now, we risk compromising a case with significantly broader implications." "How broad?" "I can't say. broad enough to justify families losing their homes while you wait. I understand your frustration, but this is how federal investigations operate. We have to weigh. I've spent 25 years weighing. Atkins Kistler. I've watched informants burn because the timeline wasn't right. I know exactly how federal investigations operate. The families in Eastside don't have time for your broader implications. I'm sorry. My hands are tied. Roland hung up. The FBI was not corrupt. Kessler was not bought. She was protecting a larger case. A larger target. Doing her job exactly the way Roland had done his 100 times. Sacrificing small justice for big justice and calling the math righteous. But the math stopped being righteous when you were the one being subtracted from the equation. Meanwhile, Prescott was closing the trap. With Roland removed from the lot, Prescott felt safe enough to resume operations, but faster, harder, sloppier. He ordered Coulter to complete 8 remaining evictions within 30 days. He told Arnett to prepare the final batch of quitclaim deeds, and he instructed his remaining clerk, Denise Harper, to begin migrating property records to a private server controlled by Arnett's law firm. Purging the courthouse system of anomalous audit trail entries, Coulter served the first 2. Then came the third, a family on Vernon Street, Curtis and Shayla Henderson, 3 children under 10. Coulter drove to the house with the court order. Through the front window, she could see a child's bicycle on the porch and a set of plastic chairs where the family ate dinner in the evenings. She sat in her cruiser for 11 minutes. She thought about her mother in the memory care facility. $8,200 a month. Paid for by the $46,000 a year Prescott funneled to her in cash. She thought about the service affidavit she had signed, swearing that legal notice had been delivered to families who never received a single piece of paper. She thought about the binder she kept in a locked drawer at home, every transaction, every payment, every split maintained with the precision of a woman who had always known this day might come. She put the car in reverse and drove back to the courthouse. Prescott called within the hour. What happened on Vernon? I need more time. You've had 4 years of time. Lena, it's a piece of paper and a padlock. There are children. There are always children. That's not your problem. Your problem is whether your mother stays in that facility or moves to a state-run ward. Do I need to make that decision for you? Coulter hung up. She drove to Willowbrook Memory Care Center and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Through the window of the activity room, she could see her mother sitting in a wheelchair, staring at a garden she would not remember seeing 5 minutes from now. The woman who had raised Lena alone, working 2 jobs, pressing her school uniforms every night. The woman who now called Lena by her dead sister's name. When Coulter got home, there was an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside a single sheet of paper with 2 columns. Column 1, her annual salary. Column 2, the annual cost of Willowbrook. At the bottom, 1 line. The difference is $46. Ling, ling, ling. Where does it come from? She stood in her kitchen holding the paper. And for the first time in 4 years, the accounting in her head failed to balance. Roland waited. He had sent the envelope a week earlier, before he was fired, and he needed Coulter to sit with it. Pressure, like infection, required time to spread, but time was running out. Terrence called with news. Prescott had hired a private security firm to sweep the courthouse for listening devices and to run enhanced background checks on all former employees and contractors. Roland knew what that meant. A competent private investigator with the right contacts could pull federal pension indicators, restricted employment records, and agency affiliations within 48 hours. Anitsu, with his network of Washington contacts, could do it faster. How long before they find out who you really are? Terrence asked. Days, maybe less. He had to move now. Saturday evening, 6:15. The courthouse lot was nearly empty. Coulter walked to her Pathfinder alone. Roland stepped out from behind a concrete pillar near the exit ramp. Deputy Coulter. She stopped. Keys in hand. Her right hand moved toward her hip instinct. Not intention. Who are you? The parking lot attendant you had fired last week. I didn't have anyone fired. That was Prescott. I know. And I know why. I know about the quitclaim deeds, the shell companies, and Franklin Voss notarizing signatures that don't belong to the people on those documents. I know about the service affidavits you signed, the ones certifying that homeowners were properly notified of hearings they never knew about. I know about the default judgments Arnett obtained because nobody showed up to contest transfers they were never told about, and I know you keep a second set of records. Coulter's face went white under the parking garage. Fluorescence. You need to walk away right now. Last Friday, Arnett came to the courthouse at 4:47. He stayed 50 minutes. He left with a manila envelope thick enough to hold a legal filing. I've been watching that escalade for 8 months. Deputy. He's never stayed that long before. Something changed. You want to know what I think changed? I think Prescott asked Arnett to draft a document that puts the entire operation on one person's shoulders. I think that person is you. You don't know what you're talking about. I spent 25 years in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, Undercover Division. I've sat across from men running operations that would make Prescott look like a shoplifter. You're not the hardest conversation I've had, but you might be the most important one. Because right now, you're the only person in this scheme smart enough to have kept records, and smart enough to know that when Prescott decides to burn someone, it won't be himself. Coulter said nothing for a long time. A car passed on the street below. Somewhere a dog barked. You don't have authority, she said. You're retired. I don't need authority. I need your records. And you need to give them to me before Prescott's private investigator pulls my federal employment history and finds out exactly who I am, because once he knows, he'll know you're the only leverage point I have, and he'll move on you before the sun comes up. How do I know you're not wearing a wire right now? Because if I were wearing a wire, I'd be working with the FBI. And the FBI told me to go away because Prescott is more useful to them alive and operating than he is in handcuffs. They're building a bigger case. They don't care about the families. Something shifted behind Coulter's eyes. Not trust recognition. The recognition of a woman who had always suspected she was expendable and had just heard it confirmed by someone with no reason to lie. It's not 47 properties, she said quietly. How many? 61. Going back 5 years. 47 were for Eastport Commons. The other 14 were sold through separate developments or transferred to political trusts. She looked directly at Roland. 3 of those went to a trust controlled by County Commissioner Raymond Sharp. Roland's chest tightened. Raymond Sharp, the leading candidate for Florida's 7th Congressional District, endorsed by the governor, funded by every developer on the First Coast. If Sharp was receiving stolen properties through Prescott's scheme, this was not county fraud. This was federal political corruption, and it explained everything about Diana Kessler. The FBI was not protecting Prescott because he was cooperating. They were protecting him because he was the thread that led to Sharp. 61 families sacrificed to protect a timeline. I need those records. Coulter, tonight, if I give them to you, I go to prison. If you don't, you go to prison anyway. Prescott's affidavit guarantees it. The only question is whether you walk into a courtroom as a defendant or a cooperating witness. Coulter drove to Roland's duplex at 10 that night. She brought a laptop and 2 external hard drives. 5 years of records, every forged deed, every fraudulent notarization by Voss, every false service affidavit she had signed, every payment from Hale, every split to Prescott and Arnett, catalogued with the precision of a woman who had spent 4 years building her own life raft. Roland reviewed the files for 3 hours. Then he picked up the burner phone and dialed the OIG contact Dale Cantor had provided. He sent the evidence directly to the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General, the federal watchdog that investigated misconduct within the FBI itself. He was not just exposing Prescott. He was exposing the FBI's decision to let Prescott operate while 61 families burned. He expected days. He got one night, one Sunday, and a few hours before dawn, and every one of them was dangerous. Sunday morning, Coulter called Roland. Her voice barely controlled. Prescott called an hour ago. He knows I've stopped answering. He wants me at the courthouse immediately. Stay home. Don't go back to the office. Pack a bag. If I don't go back, he'll know I've turned. He's going to know anyway. The question is whether you're in his office or outside it when the doors open. Coulter hung up. She sat in her kitchen staring at the wall. Then she drove to Willowbrook and sat in the parking lot, watching through the window as her mother stared at a garden she could not remember. Then she drove home. Sunday afternoon, Arnett's investigator delivered his report. Roland Jefferies' federal pension indicator. Restricted employment history. Retired special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives. Operational assignments. Classified. Prescott read the page twice. 25 years with operational assignments. Classified. The missing work history. The absence of photographs or public records. The parking lot attendant had spent his career undercover. He called Arnett. We need to move the server migration to tonight. Everything off the courthouse system by morning. And I need you to file an emergency motion to accelerate the remaining transfers. Tell Judge Whitfield it's a clerical backlog issue. Wayne. What's going on? The parking lot attendant is a federal agent. Silence. Then Arnett. I'm filing the motions within the hour. Prescott called Hale. Shut down the Vernon Street site. Pull your crews off East Side. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. Then Prescott did the thing that would seal his fate. He called Denise Harper, his remaining clerk, and told her to begin deleting the audit trail entries from the courthouse server, the time-stamped logs showing exactly when each fraudulent deed had been entered, by whom, and using which override codes. Denise started deleting. But 12 hours earlier, based on Coulter's evidence and Roland's warning that the records were at risk, the OIG had obtained an emergency preservation order and a sealed remote access warrant. The county's IT contractor had been instructed to mirror the courthouse server without notifying local administrators. Every deletion Denise executed was captured in real time on a federal backup that Prescott did not know existed. What Prescott believed he was erasing became the clearest evidence of obstruction the OIG had ever collected. At 6 the next morning, Roland was in his kitchen when his burner phone rang. A voice he did not recognize. Calm. Federal. Precise, Mr. Jefferies. This is Assistant Inspector General Michael Rourke. We have a team on the ground in Jacksonville. A sealed warrant has been approved through the Middle District of Florida and will be executed by an FBI headquarters public corruption team operating outside the Jacksonville chain of command. We're moving at 7:40. I'm calling because your name is in the case file, and I want to make sure you understand that your identity will become part of the public record once the indictment is unsealed. Roland looked at the photograph on the refrigerator door. Still face down. His daughters. His old life. The life that ended so he could do work that mattered. And the silence that followed when the work was done. I understand. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for 7 years. I just didn't know it. Monday morning. 7:40. Prescott's black Lincoln pulled into the reserved spot. Engine off. Door open. Gray suit. Red tie. He walked toward the side entrance. Adjusting his cufflinks, Roland was not in the lot. He was parked across the street in Terrence's truck. Watching, inside the courthouse lobby, 6 agents in dark suits stood in a loose semicircle. SSA Diana Kessler was not among them. She had been notified of the OIG intervention at 5 a.m. and ordered to stand down. Her investigation into Sharp, 2 years of patient work, and had been detonated by a parking lot attendant she had dismissed on a phone call 3 weeks prior. Wayne Prescott. The lead agent stepped forward. Yes. What is this? Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit deed theft, obstruction of justice, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Prescott's mouth opened. No sound came out. As the agents turned him around and applied handcuffs, he looked through the glass doors across the parking lot, past the empty booth where Roland used to stand, to the truck parked on the far side of the street. Roland did not wave. By noon, Hale was arrested at a construction site. Arnett was taken from his Riverside Avenue office. The state bar filed an emergency suspension petition before the end of the day. Franklin Voss, the notary, was picked up at his home in Mandarin. Commissioner Sharp received a federal subpoena that afternoon and suspended his campaign by evening. Denise Harper cooperated immediately, providing server access logs showing the overnight deletions Prescott had ordered. The OIG found no criminal misconduct on Kessler's part, only a decision that had allowed preventable harm to continue. She was removed from public corruption and reassigned to Omaha. Coulter pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud. 18 months. Minimum security. 3 years supervised release. Before her surrender date, she moved her mother to a Medicaid-funded facility in St. Augustine, smaller, with a garden. 61 property transfers were voided by federal court order. The process took 4 months. Not every loss could be reversed. Some houses had been demolished, replaced by condominiums that now sat in receivership. Those families received restitution checks. It was not justice. It was the closest thing available. Mrs. Dixon walked back into the house on Moncrief Road on a Wednesday afternoon in October. Terrence carried her boxes. The ceramic angel went back on the mantel. The photographs went back on the wall. She made sweet tea and sat on the porch and watched the street as if she had never left. Pastor Mosley's chain-link fence came down on a Saturday morning. By afternoon, volunteers were setting up tables for the food pantry. 200 families received groceries that weekend. Roland did not attend any of the homecomings. When the indictment was unsealed, His name entered the public record, Roland Jefferies. Retired special agent. Bureau of alcohol, tobacco, firearms and explosives. The Jacksonville media ran it within 48 hours. His photograph appeared on 3 local broadcasts and the front page of the Florida Times-Union. The face he had kept out of every database for 25 years was now searchable by anyone with a phone. Federal authorities offered to relocate him under a protected identity through the U.S. Marshal Service. Roland declined. He packed his duplex in a single afternoon. Before he left, he took the photograph off the refrigerator door and turned it over for the first time in 3 years. His daughters on the pier in Pensacola, squinting into the sun, smiling at a man they no longer spoke to. He put the photograph in the glove compartment, not in the waterproof case with the credentials. In the glove compartment, where he could reach it, he opened his phone, found his oldest daughter's number, and held his thumb above the call button. After a long moment, he locked the screen and placed the phone beside the photograph. He drove down Moncrief Road one last time. Mrs. Dixon was on her porch, sweet tea in hand. She saw the truck. She raised her hand and waved not urgently. Just the wave of a woman greeting someone she recognized. Roland touched 2 fingers to the brim of his cap. He did not stop. He turned west onto the interstate, toward no particular city, carrying nothing but a waterproof case, a photograph, and the knowledge that 61 families across East Side would sleep tonight without wondering whether a forged signature could erase them by morning because a man with a broom decided that being invisible was no longer enough. Roland Jefferies traded the last safe place he had to give 61 families back what was stolen from them. They would know his name from a headline. They would never know what it cost him. If you were in his place, if the price of justice was the only life you had left, would you pay it? Tell us in the comments. If this story stayed with you, like and subscribe. The next one is already waiting.